Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are, whenever you're joining us, welcome. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to what we're calling the Proposal Development Playbook. This online asynchronous series is meant to supplement the inaugural speaker series of the Center for Enhancing Research Capabilities of Minority Serving Institutions, or CERC-MSI, at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. We plan to supplement this main speaker series with 5 presentations that address core realities of research administration in an acceptable, digestible, and practical way. Our goal with these online supplements is to ensure you feel confident in your ability to begin preparing your proposals and applications at your home institutions. Before we begin, I want to share a few notes, as I know each of you come to us today from a variety of institutions of higher education. First, I will present these sessions with the assumption that A, the viewer is fairly new to the details of research administration, and B, there are administrative gaps at your home institution when it comes to preparing and submitting grant proposals. These gaps may come in the form of a smaller sponsored program staff, a shorter institutional history of preparing federal grants, or something similar. If at any point you find yourself encountering a subject that you may already know, I invite you to skip to sections that may be of more salience to your situation. Now, a little bit about your presenter. My name is Steve Robichaud, and I currently serve as Assistant Director of Proposal Development at Swarthmore College, a liberal arts college located outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've worked in grants and contracts for my entire career, and specifically worked in research administration at both research universities and liberal arts colleges for the past decade. I'm an active member of the National Organization of Research Development Professionals, the Society for Research Administrators International, and the National Council of University Research Administrators. I regularly present on these topics to Swarthmore faculty, staff, and students, and I've successfully submitted hundreds of federal, state, local, and private foundation grants throughout my career. Today, and throughout this series, I hope to empower you with a fuller knowledge of the administrative landscape of research funding, as well as tangible next steps to ensure you can receive formal consideration and feedback from federal funders. On that note, let's begin. The legal identity of a grant. Who is the applicant? One of the most important concepts to understand right out of the gate is who is the actual applicant? In a federal world, grants are awarded to the institution, not the individual PI. Whether you are at a university, college, or a research institute, the school is the legal identity that assumes all legal and financial responsibility for the award. It's worth thinking of this as a shared responsibility partnership. You, as the principal investigator, or PI, are the project director and technical lead responsible for the science. Meanwhile, your institution provides the compliance framework and is responsible for the administration. Under Federal Policy 2 CFR 200.400, CFR standing for the Catalog of Federal um, uh, uh, the Catalog for Federal Regulations, the government places the burden on the institution to ensure the efficient and effective administration of the award through sound management practices. You bring the vision and they bring the safety net. Navigating university administration. So because the institution is the legal grantee, you have to navigate a specific chain of command to get a proposal approved. What does this look like? So your journey starts at the department or division level. And it's worth remembering that this chain of command corresponds to how your college or university or research institute is already organized, right? So this level focuses on resource allocation, that is to say your department or division, your available time, or what we call effort, and space requirements, as in physical space. You'll likely work with what's called a departmental research administrator who supports you in managing budget details and non-salary items like travel and equipment. Sometimes, though, you don't have access to this, and we'll get back to this in a little bit, but just note that generally speaking, your department has a dedicated administrative staff person that helps you with some of these initial concerns. Depending on your organization as well, this level, that is to say the college or the school, ensures your project aligns with broader academic goals of the institution. So think of your college or school being the gatekeeper when it comes to a strategic plan or a strategic framework. And depending on what kind of proposal you're preparing and submitting, you may want to consult this language and also what their goals are as well, so that what you're proposing is in alignment with what they're trying to achieve at the institutional level. So that's with the college or the school, right? And then finally, you want to focus on what we're calling your central hub, or your central research administration hub. This is often called your Office of Sponsored Programs, or OSP. Sometimes they're called the Office of Sponsored Projects, or they could be the Office or Division of University Research. Um, if your institution is a little bit larger and some, say an R1 institution. This office, regardless, they handled the business side of the grant, including contract negotiation, compliance with federal rules like federal uniform guidance, and the final legal submission. They also coordinate with research compliance, or the Office of Research Compliance, um, and their associated committees like the Institutional Review Board for Human Subjects, or IACUC for animals, to ensure you meet all ethical requirements. So this office is really an important element of your ability to serve as the agent of your institution as you apply for external funding. So this is the chain of command. Moving forward, how do you interact with this chain of command? And one of the key concepts here to understand and to learn is the authorized organization or authorized organizational representative, or AOR. So let's talk about this, which is to say the gatekeeper of submissions. The AOR is a designated official at your institution who has the delegated authority to sign grant applications and legally bind the institution to the federal government's terms. You might wonder why you can't just hit the submit button yourself. Federal portals like Grants.gov, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation today and in future sessions, they actually restrict that button to verified AORs to prevent individual faculty from making an unauthorized legal commitment on behalf of the university. In the standard submission workflow, you, the PI, complete the technical narrative and the science portions, while the AOR performs the final institutional review and then provides the legal sign-off. Now, I'll pause here, and I'll emphasize this later in the presentation, but the AOR can be an individual, not just on the dean's level or above, so your dean, your provost, associate provost, and then ultimately the president. All of them can hold the AOR designation, but also folks that tend to be closer to, say, my level, that are an assistant director or above, that are able to do a range of things, not just signing contracts and complex documentation, but also making sure that when you submit the application that you are submitting with that kind of legally binding authority that I mentioned earlier. So again, the AOR can be a number of different levels of administrator at your institution. The point is to make sure that when you prepare an application that you have an AOR in mind. So if you don't have that, or you don't know who that person is at your institution, this is a really good place to begin thinking about as you prepare your federal application. So the digital infrastructure, required registrations for federal funding. To even speak to the federal government, right? And when we say speak, we mean institutionally. Your institution must maintain a multi-layered digital identity. I think of these as the three pillars of federal funding when it comes to authentication and identification. So what are the three pillars? The first is SAM.gov. SAM, remember, stands not just for Uncle Sam, but also more specifically, the System for Award Management. This is the foundation, the institutional ID. It validates that your school is a legal active entity eligible to receive taxpayer funds. It's worth pausing here for a moment to think about, at your institution, you probably have purchased items within your institution, for your institution at different points, perhaps not using grant funds, but some other source of funding. You may have also encountered a list. Sometimes it's called a list of preferred vendors, or in some cases, a list of verified vendors. And in each case, this is a similar or an analogous list of what's represented in SAM.gov, albeit in this case for entities that can do business with the federal government. So again, this system is meant to ensure that your institution is fully recognized by the federal government as being able to receive federal funding, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation, but just take a note that this is a foundational form of identification. Moving forward, let's talk about Login.gov. This is your personal security key. For example, in order to eventually log into SAM.gov, you're going to need to first register at Login.gov. It is a secure sign-on service. Think of it as a single sign-on service that principal investigators must use to prove their individual identity before accessing sensitive federal data. So again, we'll look at this here in a moment, but just note that this is a really important element of your ability to authenticate yourself as you interface with these government websites. And then finally, I want to highlight what's called Grants.gov. This is your application workspace. It is the digital tool where you will actually upload your documents associated with your proposal and where your team manages the proposal in real time. And I should note that many institutions may have a system-to-system platform. We at Swarthmore College use something called Cayuse, Cayuse SP and Cayuse S2S for that purpose. But you can also use Grants.gov directly, and that's what we call the application workspace. Again, we'll go into this a little bit. I'll even show the website and just give you kind of a flavor of what it looks like and what you'll be in for as you prepare your application. But just note, this is a really important website that allows you to actually prepare and then ultimately submit the application. So in review, we have your institutional ID, we have your personal ID, and then we have the institutional workspace to prepare and submit your application. Okay, let's go a little bit more deeply into SAM.gov. So SAM.gov, again, is the foundation, the system for award management. And a key concept within SAM.gov is something called the Unique Entity Identifier, or the UEI. Think of this as the social security number of your institution. And what do I mean by that? While you, the PI, usually do not register here yourself, your Office of Sponsored Programs maintains this. You will need that UEI number for almost every single application form you fill out. So in other words, much like when you prepare paperwork on a personal basis for various, human resources functions at your institutions or any number of other kinds of form of paperwork, it's meant to be a unique number that identifies you as an individual. The Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI, performs a very similar function for institutions. It's a way for the government to make sure, it's a shorthand way to make sure that not only you are who you say you are, but that you're representing the institution that you say you're representing, right? So federal policy, I should note, is very strict here. For example, any entity seeking Department of Justice, DOJ funding, must have an active registration in SAM.gov. And here's a critical tip. You should begin the SAM.gov registration or renewal process about 30 days prior to any deadline to allow time for the full process to play out. Additionally, you should be aware that all responsibility and qualification records in SAM.gov are publicly available after a 14-day waiting period. Okay. So again, with SAM.gov, you have your unique entity identifier. That's a number that, usually an alphanumeric identifier that you'll need to have on hand for any application you submit. Its purpose is verification. Make sure that what you're doing is on behalf of who you actually say you are, and also the institution that you say that you're a part of. And just as crucially, that your institution is eligible to receive taxpayer funds. And when we say eligible, that eligibility has different dimensions. For example, making sure that you're not in some sort of delinquency as an institution, that you haven't been debarred or suspended in some way, or some other negative impact on your institution. SAM.gov makes sure that your institution is properly reflected in the system, number one, but also that the federal government recognizes that you can at this point receive federal funds. Okay. So moving forward, let's also look into a little bit more with Login.gov and Grants.gov. So here, once the institution is set up, in SAM.gov, we need to move forward with further authentication and then the actual application portal, right? So first in this line is like Login.gov, where you must create an account using your institutional email to prove your identity before you can access any federal application data. Then we have Grants.gov. So Grants.gov is the primary one-stop shop for over 1,000 federal grant programs. You will spend most of your time in what's called the workspace. This is the collaborative environment where PIs upload documents and AORs sign off on your application. If you're a first timer, I highly recommend exploring the Grants Learning Center on the Grants.gov website. And we'll look a little bit on where you can find some of those videos. It is your gateway to the federal grants world, filled with grant writing tips and intro videos. So again, it's one of many resources that you can take a look at that the federal government offers. And I hope that you will take advantage of that opportunity. So let me offer a visual aid, and this is meant to both reiterate and replicate what I said before, but let's think of it in a more propulsive way. So when it comes to Login.gov, again, this is your secure sign-on service. This authenticates you as an individual to begin utilizing a platform like, say, Grants.gov, as we see in the middle. And again, this is your sort of centralized storefront, which is really the place where you can begin preparing and ultimately submitting your application. Now, again, that website further has Workspace, which is the collaborative tool within Grants.gov where PIs upload documents and AORs sign off. So that's how your flow, your workflow is going to look when you're setting things up with these websites. Okay, so I know this is a lot of sort of alphabet soup. So let's use this summary table to help it stick. All right, so let's look from your left, moving horizontally to your right. Let's first look at the line SAM.gov, right? So SAM.gov, or the unique entity identifier, what's its purpose? It validates your institution's status as both a legal and a fiscal entity. It's managed by your research administration hub, either your central administration version of that, sometimes called the research division, or in many cases, you'll have, again, your OSP or your Office of Sponsored Programs. Moving downward, let's look at Login.gov. Again, by way of reminder, that's the security, provides a secure identity for the individual that's looking to submit. And again, that's the PI or you, presumably. Let's further look at Grants.gov. Again, that's where you prepare and submit the actual proposal. And that's managed by in different elements yourself in terms of the application data that you're uploading. And then also your authorized organization representative, and they provide the legal standing to ultimately submit the application. And then finally, let's look at the AOR signature. So again, this is the final step when you both prepared and you're ready to submit the application. The signature is what tenders your application to the agency for formal consideration. And that's managed, again, by your director of the Office of Sponsored Programs, your dean, or somebody higher in your administration. So we find ourselves at the end of our journey. Now, before I go into these next steps, which I'll use to discuss here and conclude our first presentation, I do want to take a moment and head out of this presentation. So what we're going to do is go to first SAM.gov, which I want to give you sort of a look and a flavor of what this looks like so that you're not totally caught off guard as you first encounter it. So here's the front page for SAM.gov, right? And so when you want to sign in here, you can do this at the top right corner, and you'll see more information here regarding, for example, more education as to what a UEI does and what it's for, and several forms of education in the form of frequently asked questions and announcements and other things. And again, your OSP staff, should you have access to that at your institution, will be familiar with these announcements and will make announcements throughout the year, depending on what's going on. But you'll ultimately want to sign in, right? And notice here that you sign in using your Login.gov account. Now, I'm not going to sign in here, but this is what it looks like. But if you want to begin creating an account, you can begin using these prompts here, okay? And so again, this is your opportunity to begin seeing if your institution can do business with the federal government. So I want to show you as well what this looks like in terms of when you search. And so ultimately you'll want to look for information that can cross all of these domains, but let's just focus on your entity information right now. And we're going to search and oh, I seem to have countered an issue here. Let's try once more. Okay, all right. So here, now you don't see universities here just immediately, but what's more important is to see what this looks like. You'll see on the left-hand side different elements of a keyword search. I'll point out this area where it says active and inactive. So some registrations are active and ongoing, and some have been placed in the system but have expired for some reason or another. Sometimes an institution might want to get a new UEI. That's fairly uh, uh, not in the norm, but that's something that may happen. So in either case, you can look at two different statuses. But as you look here, as you can see, there are many different forms of organization that will be on SAM.gov, including institutions of higher education. And I invite you to see what this looks like. But again, this is just a way to make sure that you can see who is active and who is not. Now here, there's a bit less information than you might see if you were fully logged in, which I'm not at this point, but you can see information here relative to this particular entity, right? So that's SAM.gov. And again, we can look more into that as time wears on, but I wanted to show you that. I also want to show you Login.gov. So Login.gov here, again, shows you how you can sign in with Login.gov. It can give you some information as to how to actually, like, how does it work? How do you sign in? And again, some of the reasons behind why this exists. But then you can go into it even more in depth if you like, and you can see that here. I always think it's helpful to take a look here. But then also this is where you would go through the prompts to ultimately create a Login.gov account, which I'll remind you allows you to sign in to SAM.gov. So again, that's something you'll want to keep in mind for not only your professional use, but also personally as you want to interact with, say, another website of import to individuals, perhaps the IRS or something along those lines. So this is a good website to look at to provide that kind of single sign-on authentication. So let's conclude here with Grants.gov. And with Grants.gov, I want to note here a couple of things. So first is the front page. Again, you'll ultimately log in once you have those credentials available. You can also see a variety of pieces of information. You can search for grants here, right? And you can see what's available and open at this point in time. There's, in this case, universally about nearly 1,600 opportunities at present. And that means they've been budgeted or they've been posted to their various agency websites. And you can see the information here. Here's one, for example, from the National Science Foundation. And you can see the various information therein, right? So this is for you to be able to see what a grant, or rather a grant posting looks like. But let's go back and look here for our purposes to be able to actually learn more about this website. So in that case, if you want to learn how to do this, I mentioned earlier this Grants Learning Center. And you'll learn here, it's a really great portal that helps you to learn, for example, Grants 101. Much of what I'll be telling you, not only today, but also in future sessions, will be relevant here in this section. We have a whole list of policies and eligibility and a whole variety of other things that help you to go over what it is listed in Grants.gov. And again, as you find your set of allies institutionally, for example, your office of sponsor programs, they'll be familiar with a site like this and information like this. But this is a great place to start as well. So that's Grants.gov. And then here's some more information in terms of applicants. You can look at grant applications or specifically how to apply for grants. And again, you can look in this nicely arranged website to take a look on how to do that. But I just, my purpose today is just to give you an introduction. So there you go. And we can go more into that later in a future presentation. So that being said, I want to go back to our Playbook session 1 and to finalize sort of our next steps in our journey, right? So as we wrap up this first session, I want to give you some tangible next steps so you can hit the ground running. So here's your to-do list. for the next coming couple of weeks or months. First, you want to locate your institution's sponsored programs website, find out if they have their own SOPs or standards of practice, or general administrative principles or a GAP that you need to follow. Sometimes it might be called a grants policy manual or things to that effect. Second, you want to identify your departmental grant manager or departmental grant administrator. These are your allies, right? And this would include, I should note, pardon me, the assigned Office of Sponsored Programs Officer. Again, these are your allies. These are your teammates in the project of preparing and submitting a grant proposal. So get to know them. They're great people. And I think they're people that really want to support your aspirations, not only as a researcher, but somebody that's making broader contributions to society. And they're going to help you to hopefully achieve those ends. Three, we want to create your Login.gov account using your institutional email, just like what I showed you just briefly. It takes a few steps, but it's really a good place to start all of this interactions with our 3 digital pillars. Fourth, you want to grab your institution's UEI number. This can be on your website or the Federal Demonstration Partnership or a few other different websites, and keep it handy for your records. I should also note you can search through SAM.gov to find the UEI number, which is an important database as well. And finally, we want you to check your internal submission deadline. Different institutions have different policies for this internal deadline. But basically, most OSP offices require that your final materials, your final application materials, are at least 3 days prior, ultimately even as many as, say, 10 days prior to the federal deadline to ensure a smooth institutional review. I should note, too, that depending on your institution, you may have a system that provides an overlay in terms of what we call routing. So this is an ability for your institution to make those kinds of judgments for your proposal that it's that they want to provide the support to allow you to submit. It also ensures that your application is fully compliant with the requirements, and then ultimately that you submit, that you have the AOR signature. So again, just as I mentioned there, it takes a little bit of time. So you're going to want to prepare your application materials before the federal deadline. Okay, so thank you for joining me for session 1. In our next session, we'll dive into the specific submission portals like research.gov and just grants. See you then.